Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 953 is out. So if you haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. This was exactly what I was talking about in my review to the last chapter. The last chapter ended off with a cliffhanger of what is the relationship between Gyukimaru and Kawamatsu. And I said, well, that cliffhanger is kind of anticlimactic. It's kind of not very exciting by itself because we're not led to believe that there's any sort of greater mystery. At that point in the story, we assumed Gyukimaru to be a monk samurai and simply that. And so just a samurai knowing or having a relationship with Kawamatsu, it's just not that interesting. But at the same time, I said that of course Oda would make the relationship more interesting, bring it to a place that we didn't think before. We just needed more information. There was likely something huge, some element of Wano, something that we were missing. Otherwise, the cliffhanger would be anticlimactic. So it was kind of a reminder to myself and to others who might have felt that the last chapter's ending wasn't all that exciting, like, hold on, just wait for it. This seems like one of those things that's going to have a payoff afterwards. And boy did it ever. This was a fantastic backstory. If only for the reason of you can always root for the animal companion, man. When the animal companion follows its master and stays behind for years and years, it's basically a guaranteed insert sobbing emoji. But the icing on the cake is that the animal companion, the kitsune, the fox, wasn't all that it seemed to be. It can actually transform into a human like Kitsune from Japanese folklore and has taken the form of Gyukimaru, who we've gotten to know in the story. Continuing on Kawamatsu, who was the original Gyukimaru's plan of gathering swords for the battle to come. So for me, this chapter had really two major talking points, discussion points. The first of which it relates to this fox. Guys, this is important. You guys know that this was one of my big theories about Wano, something that I personally expected to see, that I believed in, and it's come true, that we would actually meet mythical creatures in Wano that could shapeshift or transform into humans. Now obviously this isn't precisely what I expected. I didn't expect Gyukimaru to end up being a shape-shifting kitsune. But what this does is it opens that door. It makes so many other things more interesting and more possible. I just want you to understand that any character that we have gotten to know in Wano may not be as they appear. There are many shape-shifting creatures from Japanese mythology. There could be other kitsune who have that power, as demonstrated in One Piece as well, tanuki, etc. But I've seen some people argue that this fox is actually not a shape-shifting kitsune. It might be a fox that consumed a devil fruit, or a human that consumed a fox-related devil fruit. I really just don't think so, but I can't prove it, right? So basically what we know is if this would have to be a zone, if that's the case. And we've seen how zone-type users transform, and they do not transform in a puff of smoke. But at the same time, we cannot definitively say that Oda isn't using, Wano as a platform in order to make the transformation different and interesting, sort of an artistic touch to the arc, and it is simply a zone. But I just don't think so, even though we can't prove it, just because of the history of One Piece and how we know zone-type users transform. And I suppose I have my own personal bias as well, because this is what I speculated beforehand. Because of the puff of the smoke, I do believe that it is an actual shape-shifting kitsune, no devil fruit involved here, and obviously I guess we'll just have to wait to see if anyone thinks anything different. But anyway guys, I was completely entranced. I was captivated by this chapter because of the implications, specifically the relationship between the fox Onimaru and Kawamatsu. What I found to be interesting is that despite the relationship, the bond that was shared between Onimaru and Kawamatsu, Onimaru never went square, never came square, never was honest with Kawamatsu about, what it really was, its level of intelligence and its ability to transform, which suggests to me that for this fox, at least individually, and probably for any others of its kind that probably do exist as well, their existence is supposed to be a secret. Kawamatsu does not even think for a moment that this fox would be able to shapeshift. Guys, this creates the assumption, right, that if there are other kitsune that likely exist, it's probably not a one-off thing unless it's devil fruit, which I don't think so. then they would also be keeping this same secret. This would be a part of a code of being a kitsune. Don't reveal what you are and what you can do, which means they could be anywhere, purposely hiding the truth, even potentially from those that they are close friends with. Honestly, guys, think back to the last chapter and the end of this chapter. It is just amazing to me how desperate Yukimaru was, or Onimaru was, to escape Kawamatsu, who would soon find out that Yukimaru was in fact Onimaru. That is the entire reason that he ran away. He saw Kawamatsu and he ran away so fast. He opened the door as he left to the chamber. It's like, okay, here, this is what I did for you. Now don't suspect me as being Onimaru. That is how badly they want to keep this secret. And for me, guys, that is just juicy. Another thing that I want to point out to you is Kawamatsu. Now, I don't know if Kawamatsu just lived under a rock. That may very well be true. But he was very surprised at Onimaru's intelligence as he was sort of talking to the fox back in the flashback. He was like, well, I don't think that you're going to understand me, but I hope to communicate my point. Later on, he sees Onimaru digging up a grave just the same as he was doing, retrieving swords, and was very surprised by that. The point is that Onimaru is incredibly intelligent, and it surprised Kawamatsu. But to me, and I assume other readers of One Piece that are reading the Wano arc right now, its intelligence level for a creature is not something that is unprecedented. I mean, look at the Komainu, the creature that travels along with Tama, right? It's also a really smart dog. And in fact, it shares half a name with what Kawamatsu called Onimaru when he first saw him, Koma Kitsune. And it just makes me wonder whether there is more to the Komainu than meets the eye. But going back to the kitsune, in Japanese folklore, there are many different kinds of stories, tropes of stories of the kitsune, but one of which is that a kitsune plays an attractive female. And in fact, there are actual stories of humans and kitsune having relationships without the human understanding that they were in a relationship with a kitsune. The kitsune was posing as a human, and they had children that were part kitsune. And then I see someone like Grandpa Hyo, who has like a little fireball for hair, and it just makes me wonder, are you part mythical creature? Is there kitsune or something else blood in your past? Or are you an actual kitsune or something like that that has transformed? These are just some of the possibilities that this reveal helps substantiate. And I guess for me personally, I'd be excited for an entire army of just intelligent mythological creatures following the Straw Hats and the Samurai in their defeat of the Shogun and Kaido. Maybe the secret society finally reveals itself. But anyway, I don't really feel as though it's necessary to talk about all the minutiae, every single thought that can be created from this, but I'm personally really hyped for this reveal. And before we move on and talk about Enma and Zoro, I just want to point out to you that as the kitsune is leaving, we see it singing. And you guys know one of the theories that I have is that there is a definitive relationship between Hiyori and kitsune. As of right now, it is clearly part of the inspiration behind her character, and I do wonder whether or not there is more to that. And I do find it interesting that, she is sort of the one that is singing between the various acts of Wano. If she does turn out to be an actual kitsune and not just inspired by the kitsune, that would change so many things from this arc. And also, I think it would make quite a bit of sense. But anyway, let's talk about Zoro and Enma. At the very end of this chapter, Hiyori confronts Zoro about the sword Shusui and said, if this sword is really Shusui, you should give it back. Zoro, of course, believes that the sword is his, and I agree with him. It was given to him by the sword's previous owner. But realistically and unfortunately, nobody is going to believe that or buy that because they're not going to know of Moria, and they're not going to know of Moria's powers. At least not unless he arrives in Wano, which I do consider to be an actual possibility. So Hiyori Komurasaki instead suggests that Zoro could have as a replacement her father Odin's own sword, Enma, the sword responsible for Kaido's scar. So first things first, complete honesty, I majorly undervalued and underrated Odin as a fighter. I thought that he was strong, but it's sort of hard to compare. But if he actually gave Kaido an injury, the only person that we know of to have done so, then, he's top of the line, top tier. Right now, we've seen Queen, a Yonko commander, fight against Big Mom, an actual Yonko, and the difference between their power levels is so absurdly clear, you would know that in no universe, at no point in time, could Queen ever do anything to her ever. Yet Odin here seems to have actually had a legit fight against Kaido, enough to be able to injure him, and that puts Odin definitively above a Yonko commander. This also reminds me of a Shiradoji and is at least somewhat competent fight against Kaido, and later actual fight against Jack. And before I thought, well, Jack would eventually win that fight if it kept going, but now I'm not so sure. It seems perfectly reasonable for a fighter on the caliber of a Shiradoji to be an actual Yonko commander level, with Odin, sort of the king of Wano, the strongest person in Wano at the time of his death, being definitively above him, but below a Yonko. And as we said multiple times, there's a lot of space between a Yonko commander and a Yonko. It's hard to gauge, but this is just another reminder that despite what we may have seen and conclusions we may draw and Kaido's control over Wano, the samurai are a force to be reckoned with. And at the time that Kaido took over the country and joined forces with the Shogun, there was probably an actual fight. It wasn't just a rollover. There is a reason why the world government stays away from Wano. This country is one of the two strongest countries in the entire world. But to the larger question at hand, the scenario that Hiyori proposed was a trade of Shusui for Enma. And I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that Zoro takes that deal? Because for me personally, I just don't see Zoro doing that. I believe that the people of Wano presume that Zoro simply took this sword from the person who stole it from Ryuma's grave over 20 years ago. But we know, and Zoro knows, that he got it from the source directly. He defeated its previous owner, Ryuma. It is his blade. Its former user and the sword itself have chosen Zoro. He has absolutely no reason to give it up other than to appease their misconception. And that just doesn't feel like something that Zoro would typically do. I believe Zoro is self-confident enough to not need others' approval when he knows what is right and what is wrong. And it truly doesn't matter anyway, because Kawamatsu and Onimaru have been collecting and taking swords from the graves in Ringo with the intention of giving them to random fighters from the Alliance. The same would have, I don't know if they're going to actually pilfer Ryuma's grave, but if they wanted to protect the sword, then that's definitely something they should have done. Then Ryuma's sword would go to somebody because the battle is still ongoing. So why would Zoro need to turn in the sword now? Maybe later after the arc, then it would be something worthy of some consideration or some clarity. So I guess my gut feeling here, what makes the most sense to me based on Zoro as a character, is Zoro doesn't take the deal, and he keeps Shusui, or he takes Shusui. I think that most likely what Oda is doing here is he is introducing Odin's blade and the history of it having injured Kaido, but I think that this sword is destined to be used by somebody else, potentially Hiyori herself. I personally think that she needs to take a more fighter's role in this fight at some point in time, or maybe Momonosuke. Both of those people would be more deserving, and it would just make more sense for them to use their father's blade. But of course, we can't be entirely sure until Oda goes there or not. But I just want to point out, this is the time to be thinking about swords in Wano and how much it doesn't really make any sense. Remember that sword that Luffy basically stole from Hitetsu? The cursed Nidai Kitetsu? The straight upgrade over Zoro's current sword, the Sandai Kitetsu? Where did that sword go? We all presumed that Zoro would get his hands on it and be, forced to use it. But at this point in the arc, it seems like the last sword that Zoro would need. It appears as though to me that he's likely to get Shusui back. On top of that, he's being offered Enma, which could be another possible replacement. Where does this sword fall into the story, and what role does it play? Where is it? It's just so curious to me. The only thing that really makes sense to me right now is the possibility that Zoro loses another sword, or if he doesn't lose it, maybe it's destroyed. If, for instance, the Sandai Kitetsu is destroyed, it would just make sense for Zoro to upgrade to its superior version. And another question that I have about this whole situation is, how did Hiyori end up with Odin's blade? And wouldn't it be dangerous? Wouldn't it be something dangerous for her to own, given that she's supposed to not reveal her identity to anyone? Carrying around Odin's blade and being the daughter of Odin, people could potentially connect the dots. And I don't really think that women are supposed to carry blades in the first place. And for 13 years, she was an orphan living on the run. And why would the sword be given to her? Wouldn't the sword have been captured along with Odin 20 years in the past by the Shogun? I'm just curious as to how it fell in Hiyori's hands, and I just have to wonder whether or not this was something that she actively sought out, with the money that she stole from various individuals in her position as the Oira. And I just want to remind you guys, there's obviously many theories about Hiyori Komurasaki, and goes in many various different directions, but one that I find to be pretty persuasive, at least right now, given we don't have any like prime suspects, or there's very few prime suspects, Hiyori could be the witching hour boy. And if that were the case, then she would need a weapon, and this would make a lot of sense. But these are just some thoughts to mull over. Another big topic of conversation after this last chapter. It's been a topic of conversation for a while now. But Zoro's origins and Wano, who he may be related to, and a theory that I've seen crop up that I personally, I feel like I subscribe to, honestly. Zoro may be a descendant of the Shimotsuke clan, specifically of the branch or the royalty of Ringo. And here's why I buy this, guys. What you need to know is that first off, I've always been a proponent, a believer in the theory that Zoro is directly related to Ryuma of Thriller Bark. In this chapter, it was essentially confirmed that Ryuma was from Ringo, right? Not everybody in Wano is buried in Ringo and is, the eternal graves and the sword is placed. These are specifically of people from Ringo, so that would include Ryuma himself. That's why he was buried in this cemetery. And his body was so well preserved, with his sword easily accessed. At the same time, Ryuma being the famous figure that he was, it seems likely to me that given his fame, he likely married into some royal family or another. Or you could even go so far as to theorize that maybe Ryuma himself was made into the daimyo or the ruler of Ringo. So either way, what I'm suggesting is that Ryuma's descendants and bloodline exists within the ruling family of Ringo, which again is a major branch of the Shimotsuke family, which also happens to be the name of the village in the East Blue that Zoro was raised and trained in. So anyway, guys, this theory that I'm seeing around social media that I personally find really persuasive is that Zoro is actually the direct descendant of the ruling Shimotsuke family, and was purposely shipped out of Wano for his own protection, as his entire country and his entire family were basically killed. He is the true Lord of Ringo. Now, of course, this may be more want than you can actually substantiate at this point in time, but I just think that this is something that I personally like a lot. I do think that it fits in given what we know right now, and it would add a lot of weight between Zoro's growing relationship with Onimaru. We're basically speculating that this was the fox that was the companion of his father. And based on the silhouette that we got, I think that this person does look like they could be related to Zoro. And also, if this fact were to ever be revealed, he would then, without a doubt, have earned being able to wield Shusui, which I don't believe that he should give up. But anyway, before we end this video, it's been a long time since we talked about the cover stories in One Piece, but right now it's following Capone Beige, and something really interesting is happening. They're obviously looking to retrieve Lola, and they are heading to the Florian Triangle. They're heading to Thriller Bark. Now, I don't think that Lola is there, but I'm curious as to what they will meet on the journey there. It's been a long time since we've seen the Florian Triangle, and a long time ago, if you guys remember, there were beasts hidden in the Florian Triangle, which were very mysterious and to this day unexplained. And if we got any clues or a straight up reveal of what these things are, my mind would be completely blown. But anyway, guys, I thought that this was an absolutely fantastic chapter of One Piece, and I'm really curious as to what you guys thought about it, whether you noticed something that I might have missed. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.